Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lonely Artist podcast. I'm your host, Ariane, and you're in a space where lonely artists get together to chat about our journeys, our dreams, our hopes, and thoughts. Today's guest is Marc Overney. I know him as a wonderful and extremely patient animation teacher, but he is also a seasoned animator who has worked for cool projects like A Goofy Movie, Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, Watch Dogs Legion, Best and Bester, Grossology, Detentionaire, and also many more. I couldn't list them all. But
Yes.
thank you so much, Marc, for coming to the podcast.
Thank you, Ariane, for having me on your podcast. Nice to be here.
I was trying to get you since the semester started, but we've been busy, so we
Yeah,
finally made it
yeah,
happen.
no problem, no problem. So how have you been?
I've been good, enjoying the break, trying to recharge, but still working on the craft and trying to learn some things before we get back to it, because I don't
Yeah,
want to be left behind. It's a pretty fast-paced program, so yeah, you need to do some homework on your own.
yes, yes, there's a lot to do for sure, for sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah, go ahead.
honestly, I'm so glad to have you here because I've been meaning to ask you all of these questions in class, but now I get to do it in the podcast, which is great because more people can hear those answers and know what your journey has been and your thought process in regards to animation. So why don't we
Yeah.
start with the very beginning? How did you start this journey of art and animation?
Well, before I jump into that, I understand exactly what you mean about not being able to have this kind of conversations in a classroom. It's something that is unfortunate for me in a way too, because it's hard for me to get to know students, right?
Yeah.
'Cause it's always like, okay, we got to go, 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 right? Feedback, feedback. And then before you know it, 3 hours are up, right? And we're done. It's like, you know? So there is really, I think, what was it, towards week 14, I think I had a chance to just sit down and shoot the gab with you for like maybe 30 seconds, I think,
Yeah.
right? Remember? Um, that's like a luxury, you know,
Hmm.
honestly. So it's tough, you know.
Yeah.
My journey, well, geez, God, we got to go way back in the time machine for this. I've been around a long time. I'm pretty old now. So
You're like
let's see.
30, right? That's what
Yeah,
the
I'm 30.
animation
That's
industry
right.
does
Yeah.
to you.
I'm 30? No, you mean I've been in the business for 30? Yeah, more than 30 years now, actually. Yeah, it's gone by really fast, actually. It's kind of amazing how quickly things keep moving forward, right? Um, yeah, so the question, how did I get into art, basically? Honestly, I think it's like the same thing as it is for a lot of us, right? It's just something we're drawn to very young, you know. I mean, everybody draws when they're kids, right? And then most people kind of go away from that as they get older. And people like us, we stick to it, right?
Yeah.
We want to be creative. So yeah, I just kept drawing. I loved drawing as a kid. I loved drawing from comic books, like everybody else. So for me as a kid, it was Marvel Comics and Mad Magazine. Those were like my two favorite things when I was growing up. So I did my own comics. And yeah, I had an idea about going to work for Marvel. Like I always thought about going to New York and I was going to go work for Marvel Comics, right? So that was kind of my goal as a kid, I guess you could say. Animation, I didn't really think about animation until much, much later. I didn't get into animation until probably like my late teens, early 20s, because I never thought about animation. Like I loved watching Saturday morning cartoons, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a child of the 70s, right? So I grew up in the 70s. And, I'd be running down there every Saturday morning with my sugary bowl of cereal and just watching 3, 4 hours of cartoons. But I never actually thought about who actually, like, I don't remember thinking about, like, oh, who makes these cartoons? Like, where do they make them, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's kind of a blur, honestly, but I think the way I got into animation was I'd taken a couple of college courses before I went to Sheridan, and one of them was a photography course. And I just, most of that was me just going around taking black and white photos and then developing them. And then right near the end, our teacher, this old lady, I forget her name, she was great. She busted out this animation book called The Animation Book by Kit Layburn, funnily enough. And she must have pulled a couple of exercises out of it. She had these little wooden boards with pegs on them, and we could put paper on there and we could just like draw. So we weren't learning like principles of animation, all that stuff we're teaching you guys, right? We were just kind of goofing around. So I did like some morphing, like a face morphing into an animal or something, some weird stuff. But we got to shoot it all on a camcorder or something. We all got to watch it back. And it was exciting. I mean, it was so cool to see it. And I think that was kind of the beginning for me of like realizing like, oh, there's this thing called animation, right?
Right.
And then that would have probably been around 87, 88. And that was a pretty pivotal year in animation. It was kind of a resurgence or a renaissance for animation, like the second golden age, I guess they called it.
Hmm.
So we had like Roger Rabbit coming out, Little Mermaid was just about to come out. Pixar was sort of up and coming with their 3D shorts and winning some Oscars. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff that was starting to happen. So I probably was aware of some of that. And that's kind of how it started for me, right? Before that's
Right.
all before I even got to Sheridan, right?
It's
So
so
how
interesting how you don't even realize. I feel like animation is very exciting when you do it because you put so much effort into it and you're drawing, at
yeah,
least back then, you were like drawing every single frame and
yeah,
then seeing the magic happen. But as a
yeah,
person who doesn't necessarily know about animation, you don't even think about how it's just drawings one after the other and they
right,
create motion.
right.
So it's fun that you got that realization from a photography class.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of a weird way to get into it. Um, yeah, it was really just kind of it's really the first time that I can think of where I was actually conscious of like, oh, animation.
Right,
Prior to that, I mean, I drew, I love drawing, as I said, comics and all that stuff for sure. Um, but actual animation, no, I don't really remember thinking about that too much until really that moment. And then, like I did take some art courses. I took some fine art courses like drawing. I did some sculpting. I did like wood sculpting, soapstone sculpting. It was fun, but I remember always thinking like, how can I transfer these skills to be a job, like to get a career, right?
right.
Like, how am I going to make money doing this, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I was kind of lost for a while. I was also into playing music a lot back then, like around 17, 18, 19, and 20, those 4 years. So I kind of put my pencils away, and I was more into music for that period of my life. So yeah, I was a little bit lost. I didn't really know exactly where to go.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend, now my wife, she said to me, she said, well, why don't you go to some art schools, like art and design schools? There's some really good ones in Ontario. So I grew up in Montreal, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm actually not from Toronto. So I grew up in Montreal, and I don't know if there was anything up there like that. There might have been, but back then, like, again, this is like 1989. Um, there was really only two places, as far as I know, to learn animation: Cal Arts in Los Angeles
Hmm.
and Sheridan, right here in
Right.
Oakville. So, anyways, yeah. So she said, "Why don't you apply to these art schools?" And so I applied to a whole bunch of them. Sheridan was one of them. I got in. Um, but I think I still wasn't sure if I wanted to get into animation. Like I think I had illustration also as another option, but I guess I decided to go into animation. So rest is history, right? I got into it,
Yeah,
never looked back.
exactly.
Um, yeah, but it was really cool because when I got accepted, I was so excited. It's like I literally kid you not. So this is before the internet, blah blah blah, right? So I literally hopped in my car because back then what they would do is they would send you a
A
package,
letter,
yeah,
right?
or a
Yeah.
letter, yeah, and there'd be like a pamphlet, right?
Hmm.
That was about it. So when I had time, I was working, I had a full-time job at the time. I had my own apartment and stuff. I was like 20, 22. So what I did is I was working as a courier, meaning so what I did is I delivered packages out of the local airport in Montreal. I did this 5 days a week, right? On the road. I can tell you stories about that too. Oh my God. Put on a lot of weight because I was always eating in the
Yeah.
car. You know, it was like just driving 8 hours a day.
I feel like those kinds of jobs just make
Oh,
you want to just sit down all day and munch
yeah.
and stuff all day.
No, it was, I mean, it was an okay job, you know, it paid okay, but it was just like, it was nuts. Like just being on the road 8 hours a day, dealing with traffic and
Yeah.
road rage and people and eating in the
Just
car.
sounds stressful.
Well, it was, and like sometimes I'd have to deliver downtown Montreal, and it'd be like trying to find parking, you know. So
Mm.
Montreal is notorious for like not only double parking but triple parking. You know, it's
Oh wow.
insane. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how many times I ran out and literally rescued my car from being towed at the
Oh my
last minute,
God.
right? Oh, it was insane. Anyway, so that's what I was doing just before I went to Sheridan, right? So one day I decided that I was going to go down there and check it out for myself. I was excited, right? So I literally worked all day and then I don't know, I had dinner, I guess, and then I took off, drove down the 401, 6 hour drive to Toronto, stayed in a motel for a couple of nights, and I went to the college. I didn't even have an appointment to meet anybody. Like I just literally showed up, walked around. I wanted to see it, you know?
Right.
And I remember just being really impressed. Like, I don't know, um it seemed more organized. It seemed like it had more stuff than what I was used to seeing for some reason. And I remember walking to the camera room. So back then we had cameras shooting film, and I'd see those three Bolex cameras on the back wall they had back then. And above each one, they had like a yellow card with Mickey Mouse front face drawings on it, right? Over each camera. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, I felt like I'd walked into Disney Studios for God's sake. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was cool. I walked around. I saw all the desks. I saw the equipment. I don't know if I talked to anybody. I can't remember now, but yeah, it was really exciting. And then of course I started in the following September, right? I went down there. So
And I feel like animation, I resonate with you in the sense that like I've always been interested in arts and crafts,
yeah,
but it's been very hard to like focus on one single thing. Like I like
right.
illustration, I like writing, I like
Yeah,
photography too.
yeah,
And I feel like animation in a weird way encompasses everything
right.
that you're
It
saying
does.
that you liked.
It does. It encompasses all the art forms, really, right?
Yeah.
It's so
So
true.
it
Yeah,
makes sense, in hindsight that you'd
yeah,
maybe end up there.
yeah. Well, see, again, back then, animation was still being done traditionally, right? Hand drawn.
Hmm.
So, and I like drawing, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of made sense. And I had no idea, like comic books, I don't know. I didn't really pursue it when I got older. Like I liked it as a kid. And I do remember thinking about, oh, I want to go to New York and draw, or work for Marvel or something like that. But I had no idea like how to do it. You know what I mean? Like I wish I was smart enough as a kid to maybe have at least written a letter. Maybe I would have
Hmm.
got a response back, or maybe they would have invited me down to tour. That would have been
Yeah.
pretty.
Especially back then, I feel like maybe it was
Yeah,
more possible than now.
it might have been. Who knows? But anyways, but I never really pursued comics. Like I said, as I got older, when I became a teenager, I got more into music, and I
Hmm.
kind of dropped all the drawing stuff, for a while. And then I started picking it up again and realizing like, okay, the music thing's not really going anywhere. You know what I mean? I mean, most of the bands I played in didn't get out of the basement or the garage. So, I mean, I did a few gigs, got paid for some of them. That was cool. It was fun, but there was a lot of drugs and stuff going on and stupid stuff. And it was
I mean,
kind of,
it's the
wasn't
80s,
really for
right?
me. What's that?
It's the 80s, so it kind of,
Yeah, it would have
yeah.
been, yes, it would have been like 84, 85 or something like that. So, yeah, definitely. So yeah, it was just, I just like, I don't know. I couldn't really see where this was going, like my
Hmm.
rock star dreams weren't going to work out, I guess, right? So anyway, so it was like I started going back into drawing again. I started getting back into that again. And I love graphic stuff as well. Like I like doing a lot of I don't know what you call graphic design, I guess.
Hmm.
So I used to design all my cassettes and stuff like that and make them for people, posters,
Yeah.
anything, right? Anything that required something like that. So really enjoyed doing that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I started to build a portfolio. It was a weird portfolio, the one that I submitted to Sheridan. it had all the stuff you're not supposed to have in a portfolio.
Oh,
Don't
like
put
what?
superhero, well, like don't put other people's characters in it. Like don't put
All
super.
right.
I had Batman in there. I don't know, I had all kinds. I had drawings from cartoons in there and stuff like that. Might have had some original stuff, but I think most of it was just copying other
Yeah.
people's characters, right?
But back then, I
So
don't think it was common knowledge that you shouldn't do that, right?
maybe not. I don't know. Like, I think Sheridan had some parameters. I'm sure they did. I can't remember what they were, but I don't even think I had life drawing. I don't think I even did life drawing until I went to Sheridan, actually. I don't think.
And
Yeah.
how is that? Like, if you had never done it, like, how is that
Well, it was
going
weird.
into live
Oh,
drawing?
it was weird. The first time you go to life drawing, it was the weirdest thing, right? It's like, whoa, this is weird, you know. But we had a great teacher back then. She was an old Hungarian. I forget her name now. Susanna, I think. I can't remember her name, but she was I don't think she walked around with a stick, but I feel like she did. I feel like she
Maybe to
and,
point out like muscle structures and
maybe, yeah, or it
bones.
was a whack, you know. Wrong. But
Because Melissa now walks around with this laser beam. So she
okay,
points at things with the laser beam. It's
right.
great.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, it was, I mean, it was cool. I mean, it was we're trying to, I mean, it was all new, right? Like
Right.
this whole concept of like doing gestural drawing was completely new to me. Because I liked drawing, but I liked finished drawings, you know.
Hmm.
And so I find now, all these years later as a teacher, I find like I have to force a lot, not everybody, but a lot of students to unlearn that, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and focus on just the basics, right? Like stripping it down to getting the line of action in there, trying to just communicate what the story of the pose is, that kind of stuff, and keeping it really loose and gestural.
Well, I
Uh,
think when you are just starting, you kind of want to hide all the mistakes or the shortcomings with,
right.
like a rendered piece or
Yeah.
I don't know, just effects on your drawing.
Mm.
And live drawing kind of forces you to strip it back so much that it is obvious if you're not, doing it properly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, probably. I mean, it's tricky because, you can't really rely on adding all the little nice details,
Hmm.
right? But those are the things that slow you down, you
Right.
know? Those are the
Yeah.
things that just get in the way of getting after it. Because what we're really trying to do, especially with animation, because we have to do so many drawings, so many frames, we want to get at the essence, right? The force, the energy, all that stuff, as quickly as possible so we can get on to the next one. There's so much to
Right.
do,
Yeah.
right? So if you're there laboring over some nice, beautiful detail, yeah, that's not going to work,
Yeah.
right?
Over like a minute of animation, you're gonna go insane.
Well, especially if it's not working, then you've
Yeah,
wasted all that time, right? So, we
exactly.
call that the tie, you come back and you do a tie down or whatever they call it. Like you go back over it and tighten it up, right?
Hmm.
Once you know things are working. But initially, yeah, you've got to really get in there and just feel it out,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Strip it down as much as you can and just
Yeah.
have
Just
that
straight,
work
it's all
first.
shapes, right? It's all line and shapes,
Yeah.
really, right? For the most part, right? So doesn't matter how complex the character is, right? Obviously, cartoony characters are a little, well, I wouldn't say easy, but a little easier to understand the shapes, but
Right.
you know, yeah,
And like actually speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, so I mean,
yeah,
you obviously have this long career and you've managed to do so many different styles of animation and probably worked with different types of directors that want you to have a different approach to things. But
yeah.
what would you say like nowadays is your go-to approach for working effectively as an animator, creating animation, mostly 2D animation?
Well, what's the effective approach? Well, honestly, whether it's 2D or 3D, it's really the same for the most part. I mean, the tools are different for sure, and that can mean that the workflow is going to change a little bit, but it all comes down to planning and time management, right? So whenever I'm working on a production for example, uh, let's say I have 3 weeks to do, I'm just going to, let's say I have 3 weeks to do 2,500 frames of animation, right? And maybe I have 20 scenes or something like that to do. So that's obviously overwhelming, right?
Yeah,
Especially if you're new in the industry. I mean, I mean, if you're new, they're not going to throw you as many scenes, or as they're not going to give you the hard scenes, right?
of
At least
course.
at least they shouldn't.
Well, you would think that they wouldn't.
Everybody's different,
Yeah,
but they shouldn't, right? A good animator, or I mean, a good supervisor or director will hopefully, you know, if a production's running the way it should, hopefully they'll recognize that and not throw you into the woods or into the pool, right in the deep end
yeah.
like that, right? But yeah, for me, like what I'll do is I'll so typically like a show, let's say an episode will end on a Friday,
Mhm.
okay, and then Monday, boom, we're right back into the next episode, right? So there's really no downtime,
Yeah, of
okay, other than the weekend, which you want to use for yourself, right?
course.
You do not want to be burning the midnight oil too much. You don't want to be working every weekend because you will burn out for sure, right? So, learning how to manage your time is one of the most important things you can. The sooner and the earlier you can learn to do that, the better off you're going to be, right? The better success you'll have too, right? Um, yeah, so I will typically download. So Monday will come, right? And usually what will happen is we'll have a meeting on if nowadays a lot of this it's online, right? Since the pandemic.
Yeah.
We'll have a meeting and the director or super, well, usually the director will go over, sometimes the client might be there, depends. And they'll go over the animatic for the episode we're all going to work on, right? For the next 3 weeks. And so that takes a couple hours, go through all the shots, and they'll sort of they'll try to flag any potential issues that may come up, and so on and so forth, right? And then when that's done, what I'll do after that is my Monday then will be me just downloading all my shots, as many as I can, anyways, right?
Mhm.
And I'll just download everything. I'll try to go through as many of them as possible, meaning that I'll just open them up and look at what's in there
Right.
and kind of see what I'm going to be getting into here. I'll look at my section that I have, my sequence of shots. I'll look at the storyboards. I'll start thinking about it, what I need to do. And then I start to plan out all my shots. So I usually make 3 columns. Like I'll have a simple shots, medium, hard shots, and then really hard shots.
All
Right.
right. Are you somebody who like tackles the hardest first or the easiest first?
So it's funny you say that because typically they will tell you start with the hard ones first, get them out of the way, and
Mhm.
then leave the easy ones for yourself at the end. But I think most people do it the opposite. They start with the easy ones first, and then they kind of work their way up to the harder ones eventually. Right. I used to do that a lot too. And then and now what I tend to do is I don't do one or the other. I kind of mix it. I kind of do some easy ones and then I'll do a couple of really hard ones. And then I'll come back, do a couple of easy ones and then do some hard ones. And that way I'm not just racking my brain,
Right. Yeah.
burning myself out too much. So I'll go through my shots. I'll see everything that I have. I'll see how many frames I have for every shot, how many characters are in that shot, and I'll start to break it all down for myself and I'll try to create my own schedule now, right?
Hmm.
So I always work backwards. You got to be aware of that deadline, that final deadline on Friday.
Right.
It's due in 3 weeks. You're kind of on your own for those 3 weeks. So it feels like, yay, I get to do what I want, right?
Which
But
can be a double-edged sword.
exactly. So if you're a procrastinator, I can be a procrastinator too. Um, Yeah, if you let it slide for too long, like if you don't get started to your second week, ooh, you're probably in trouble now.
Yeah,
Because
I wouldn't want to do that.
I mean, see, the thing about it is studios, they want everybody to kind of help each other out. It's all about teamwork. We should all be rowing. What's that expression? Rowing,
Oh, rowing the boat together?
rowing the boat together in the same direction, going towards that deadline or that finish line, right?
Hmm.
So sometimes what will happen, if an animator can't finish their work on Friday when it's due, usually the supervisor will give out a shout out to the team, maybe 3, 4 days before the final deadline, and say like, "Hey, Everybody just be aware it's going to be due on Friday. If anybody feels like they're not going to be able to finish, please let me know sooner than later so I have time to reassign your shots to somebody who maybe knows they're going to finish sooner, right?
Right.
And that's okay. That's fine, but you don't want to be that animator or that
Mm.
artist on a production who gets a reputation for every time, every Friday, they got to pull shots from you to give it to other
Yeah.
people. Like it's okay a couple of times, but you don't
Hmm.
want to like always be that person, right? Because
Right.
start to get a reputation, they may not want to hire you back then.
Exactly. And I feel like and this is the impression I have. I'm still not like in the industry or anything, but a lot of the projects that you get as an animator are projects that you kind of get with the same people, but for
Right.
different things. So if you build a bad reputation, then it really closes the world for you a little bit.
Yes and no. I've been fired from productions
Hmm.
throughout my career, and it doesn't mean it's the end of your career. I mean, if you do something really bad,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, if you're stealing something or I don't know, whatever,
of course.
sure. But, you know, sometimes you don't get along with somebody. Sometimes there's it's not what's the word simpatico between you and the
Hmm.
studio. Maybe the style doesn't fit your skills or whatever, and it's not working out. It can
Right.
happen. you know the important thing is to just get back on the horse. I mean,
Hmm.
there's always something going on somewhere. There's always a production that needs people on it, and sometimes it takes a little time to figure out what it is you're really interested in.
Yeah.
you
Which is the
um,
perfect segue for me to ask you
yes.
what your favorite thing is about being an animator.
My favorite thing about being an animator, yeah, well, a lot of things actually. I would say one of the things that I like the most about it is it's never boring. It's
Mm.
never old. I mean, it can get boring. It depends, I guess, what you do. Like if you're always doing kind of the same type of stuff, maybe it does get a bit boring for you. You want to branch out, try different things. But pretty much every production you work on, it's always different people, different supervisors, different directors, different style, different types of characters. And you're always, especially if you're working on higher quality stuff, you're going to be challenged for sure, right? You're going to want to,
Right.
you might get a scene, you could be animating for 20 years. You might get a scene now that you have to animate, I don't know, like a horse jumping around or, you know, jumping over a fence and running around in circles or something. It's like, well, God, how do I do that? Right.
Yeah.
So I've never done something like that. So it doesn't get boring. You have to literally go and research and break it down and find some footage and do what you can to analyze, break it down, right?
Hmm.
So you're always learning something, like yeah, I've done animation. I did even some instructional animation. I remember early in my career, I forget what it was for some tires company, and it was the most exciting stuff. But you're learning about tires. Like, oh,
Right.
I didn't know that. It's like I wouldn't go out and research this myself normally, but I have to do it for this production I'm hired to work on. And it's, oh, okay. So that's how they make tires. And in fact, oh, interesting, right?
Yeah.
So you're always learning something new, which is cool. And animation is a great is a great medium to use to teach people stuff too, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So a lot of corporations and companies will use it to explain things, right? So it's great.
Hmm.
If you don't know how something should move or how something should behave, you got to go study, you got to go break it down, study it, right?
Yeah.
So that you can understand it and then put that into your work. So that's always going to be a challenge, no question, right?
Hmm.
Um, like another thing too, like Tom and Jerry,
Yeah.
next month or this month, well, next month mostly because I'm still technically working right now. I don't go officially on vacation for a while, but next month I'm going to be taking a bunch of Tom and Jerry cartoons from the 1940s, that golden age of animation. I
Yeah.
love that period. That's kind of like one of my favorite eras. And I'm going to be just doing my own studying. I just want to get back into some of that fun cartoony stuff, break it down, relearn some of that stuff, learn new things, and maybe I can take some of that and serve it to bring it into the classroom in future stuff.
That would
right?
be
Or
great. I mean, self-learning
so
is imperative to this
yeah,
career.
and that's the thing. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but it never stops. Like there's never going to be a point where you're like, I'm good enough now. I don't need to
Yeah.
learn. Like that's never going to happen. Um,
Hmm.
so that's what's awesome about being creative and being in the creative industry like this is having that ability. It's never really going to change. Like I'm always going to want to get better. Like even life drawing.
Right.
I
Right.
was talking to Melissa the other day about maybe going to some of her extra classes. I think she's planning on having. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
need to sort something out there, but I'd love to do that. Right.
There's,
Like
I
get
believe
back
there's
into it.
extra live drawing right now on Thursdays from
Is
6
there?
to 9. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because I
So,
also want to go.
yeah, I mean, it's not too far for me. So, yeah, stuff like that. I mean, it's always just about doing what you like and get trying to
Yeah.
learn and or relearn stuff that you forgot, whatever it might be. I took in Hamilton a few years back, this is actually quite a few years ago, I took a oil painting class. I'd never done that before. I was like the Renaissance painters painting with oil and stuff. It was really cool. Very different way
Yeah.
of drawing, right? They grid everything out, right?
Yeah, it's so hard. Oil is really
Yeah.
hard,
Yeah.
especially because you
But
have to like let it sit for a while because it doesn't dry right away, which
yeah,
means like you can blend forever.
absolutely. And one of the weird things I learned was the guy that was teaching it, he said, you want to put a bit of I was trying to do some skin pigment tone for the face. And
Yeah.
he was like, put some green in there. And I'm like, green? He goes, yeah, skin has a lot of green texture in there. And I was like, the veins I was like, really?
Yeah.
So, I mean, wow, okay. But
It's so
it
fun.
looks
Yeah.
cool
Like,
though. Yeah, it worked. Like it was awesome. So I did an okay job with it. I took a photograph of my daughter and I had her and I was using that as my reference. And yeah, it was a completely different way of drawing and approaching anything, right? And it was
right.
without any computers, so that was
Hmm.
kind of nice too.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I do miss doing some more like analog stuff because I kind of was born
Yeah,
in that weird transition period where like I had part of my life without the internet and with
right,
traditional stuff, and then
right.
this other half has been
I
all
definitely did.
digital. Yes, well, I
Yeah,
know you did, like for sure.
yeah.
For you, like that steep like change was probably even more strange and
It happened pretty
just
fast.
yeah.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah, I mean, I started in the industry around 92. So I finished Sheridan, what was it, May of 92, I think was my last time there. And then I don't know what I did that summer. I must have been working on my portfolio I was probably looking for work. I think I got my first job in September or October of that year.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I just started, you know, working in traditional animation. It's what I learned at Sheridan, right?
Right.
What they call it classical animation. That was the name of the program. And then what, 2 years later, everything is almost CG pretty much, almost overnight.
Yeah.
Not quite,
Toy
but
Story made that happen
for sure.
faster.
Yeah, funny story about that. My last year in 1992, John Lasseter and Pete Docter from Pixar actually came out to our college, right? But again, back then it was either Cal Arts or Sheridan, right?
Yeah.
So they came up to Sheridan and they gave us a talk and they showed us some stuff. And they were basically, I guess they were kind of at the beginning end of like they were starting to recruit for Toy Story.
Mm.
So they had a sign up sheet and we could sign up to sit in there and show our work, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't do it because I didn't have confidence.
Oh
Which
no.
if I could give advice to anybody as a student, it's like, please don't let that stop you
Yeah.
because it's the worst thing. You kick yourself for years about that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because even if nobody really got a job out of it necessarily, I know one guy in my class went on to work for them eventually a few years later, but that
Hmm.
initial meeting might have been the initial contact, like the initial point of networking, right?
Exactly. Yeah. For them to know that you were on
Yeah,
their radar. Yeah.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, and even just a chance to go in there, we called it the cage. We had this room at Sheridan. It was a sliding cage door where they kept all this expensive equipment in there. We had this massive thing called the Steenbeck, which was like a film version of the editing suite.
Hmm.
And yeah, we'd go in the cage usually to review stuff, and I think that's where they were. So people would sign up and go sit in there for whatever, and you'd show your work, and then whatever, right? But I didn't even
Yeah.
sign up. And, even to this day, I'm like, for no other reason, I could have just at least said I met them and talked to them, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
Well, it's a lesson, regardless, because now you know to not miss
yeah,
those opportunities.
yeah, yeah. But I did get to go to Pixar at least before they moved to their famous location now. They had a smaller
Mm.
place earlier up in a place called Point Richmond. And I went there one night visiting some people, and they had all the storyboards for Toy Story right along the wall.
Oh wow,
That was
that
just
must have been so cool.
yeah, it was really amazing. Just walking along, just looking at all that stuff, So
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, anyways, it did change fast. I mean, I worked for about 2 years doing traditional animation in Toronto, bouncing around different studios. And yeah, and then a friend of mine had gone out to California and said, "Hey, they're looking for people at Lucas Arts." And I was like, "Okay." I talked to my wife, I was like, "You want to do this?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do this." So we did, and next thing we know, we're on our way to San Francisco, right? And that was where I ended up for 14 years or 12 years, 14 years, I don't know. Left around 2006. So
Yeah, that's a long time just for like checking it out, but it's so cool. I feel I would have loved to start my career at that time because I feel like I feel right now there's a bunch of issues with, AI and like lack of jobs for a lot of animators. And I feel like back then maybe there was a lot more, it was easier. There were less people in the industry as well. So
yeah, there was, I mean, back then, so 92, I mean, that was a good time. I mean, my timing actually was good for once because I got into it just as animation was kind of resurging again, right? Like I said that
mhm.
earlier, like it's kind of the considered now like the second golden age, right? So Disney had kind of waffled through the 70s and 80s a little bit. And then they started they started making better movies, started with what was a Great Mouse Detective, and then they came out with Rescuers Down Under and then Little Mermaid, right? So that's 89. So they're back, right? Disney's
Yeah.
back, and I mean, that was a huge success for them. Roger Rabbit, as I said a year before, Pixar's starting to come up. So CG wasn't mainstream at that point, right? But it
Hmm.
was there. People were kind of aware of it. It was starting to make noise, right?
Yeah.
Jurassic Park comes out in 93. That changes the visual effects industry. 2 years later, Toy Story comes out. That changes character animation, right? So huge changes. So I had about 2 good years of classical animation where I got to draw. But it was tough though. I mean, drawing's not easy either. I mean,
No.
it's a very different kind of approach to animation than dealing with computers, right?
Hmm.
Just like, the time it takes to shoot your pencil tests and watch your animation. So there's a lot more, you really do have to rely more on your planning, I think,
Yeah.
CG, and I think that's why a lot of CG people, they kind of have to learn about planning and its importance because it's very easy to just move stuff around and hit the play button, right?
Yeah, and let it just kind of like do its thing without tweaking it or
Yeah, and then you just go
anything.
in and you just keep tweaking and noodling until you finally get it where you want it.
Hmm.
So, not really the best approach, honestly, because you can waste a lot of time that way. And certainly on a production, you've got to be able to get your stuff out quick, and you want to show your keys and breakdowns to your supervisor sooner than later, right? So you can get
Yeah.
feedback on it, which is what we
Um,
try to teach in the classroom, right?
yeah,
Try to
I feel
teach you
like
about
it kind
feedback,
of
right?
translates to the way that you teach, where you give us like deliverables and we're just kind of like giving that to you in advance
Yeah,
before the completed version of the animation. So I think in that
exactly.
sense, it parallels what you're saying
Yeah,
about how it works in the industry for sure.
right. I mean, the feedback part is really so important. It's really like the meat of the sandwich, like I feel like students who think they, or for whatever reason, want to skip over that little process, maybe they don't understand the importance of it, or they just don't want to deal with it. Not everybody likes getting feedback. It's something you kind of have to learn because you are getting critiqued.
Hmm.
Not everybody likes that, right?
It's true.
Um, some people are okay with it. Some people are completely open and they're like, yeah, yeah, give me feedback, and others are like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Go away. I get a bit of that too. Not much, but I
Yeah.
do get some of that.
I'd imagine that you
And
do.
yeah, it's a little unfortunate because I mean, honestly, like if you're not getting feedback, you're kind of missing out really on the important stuff, right? Because again, the sandwich analogy, right? So if you're not, if you're not, if you're just kind of skipping through the feedback and you just want to hand something in for the first time for your final grade, whatever, it's kind of like you're giving me a sandwich with just the bread. But we missed out on all the give and go, the give and take, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't want that sandwich. I want the one with the meat.
Yeah.
Give me the
A
good
full
stuff in there.
sandwich.
I want to see the process. I want to see,
Yeah.
I want to see you working it out and see that the feedback you got last week is being as to the best of your ability. Not everyone's going to get everything done, but it's a very important step. And it's the same way in production. I mean, maybe not quite to that extent because we're not on a production to like they're not there to teach us
Hmm.
technically, right?
Yeah.
You're there to get to do your work, but they still want to see. The supervisors still want to see your posing. Like, so we do a posing pass, which is kind of
Right.
the same thing, right? So you get it out in front of them as soon as possible so they can see that number one, they want to know that you're there and you're doing stuff. You're not just,
Yeah.
you don't just disappear for 2 weeks. They never hear
Exactly.
from you. And then the first time they see it is when the show's like practically due, right? Because at that point, there's no time now to really
Yeah.
make changes, right? Although we do get retakes. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to teach in the classroom. It's a little different because when you're getting paid to do a job, I think most people take that a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
But in a classroom, it's kind of like, I'll just get to it next week.
Yeah, and especially like there's a lot of teens still, right? So I feel like at that age you kind of feel like the
Right. Yeah,
world's your oyster.
we get a lot of people obviously coming right out of high school, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
that's also maybe part of the issues with feedback because I think in high school, a lot of it is right or wrong, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a right answer or you did this wrong,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Whereas, like in my classroom, it's like, it's not really about right or wrong. It's like if you make mistakes, that's fine. Like it's
Hmm.
okay. As long as you're working and you're coming to class and you're putting in the effort, if you're making mistakes, that's perfectly normal. Like I expect people to make mistakes, right? But at least I can then see it and I can help you hopefully try to correct it or give you some feedback to make it, try to make it better or make it work or whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
So it's not about like hiding it from me because, oh, you might say it's wrong. And there's that. And then there's the lazy students too, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You get this, I don't want to redo it. You know,
Yeah.
I got two other assignments due next week. Go away. I'm just going to do what I feel like it. I'm going to hand it in. I don't want to like
There's
revisit
always
this,
that for sure.
right? So,
Yeah.
no, whatever. I mean, but yeah, feedback super important, right?
Yeah.
It's for animation, it's critical. Absolutely, for sure.
And is there anything you don't like about like being an animator? Like, is there any part of the process or maybe anything that you're like, ugh, I really don't like this?
Well, in the modern age, I hate learning new software. I've
Mm,
had to do that a couple of times in my career. First time I think was learning Maya a long time ago. I had to learn Softimage on another production, one and only time I ever used that. Um, yeah, actually, the first time I had to learn Harmony was really tough. I actually came up from Seattle to work on a production, and I was supposed to be the supervisor, and I didn't even know Harmony. I'd never even used it. And now I'm supposed to like supervise 20 animators who know the software, right?
yeah.
So I felt like a bit of a bozo, a bit of a fake because I was like, I don't even know the frickin'. So I had to learn it like I think I had like 2 weeks training at Nelvana to learn it. And I didn't. It was like, what? It's like I didn't learn anything really.
Yeah.
So I literally had to learn on the job,
Yeah,
and yeah, it was sink or swim, right? But
exactly.
yeah, so I don't like that very much. I'm not a very technical person. Like I don't like dealing with too many technical things. That's why working in video games, well, not so much the first time around, but when I went to Ubisoft, I didn't like it as much because a lot of technical stuff.
Right.
That's not for me.
Yeah. All
Just
the
I don't have
artistic
that
part
kind
of
of,
it kind of
yeah.
like goes away.
Yeah, I just want to lay down my keys. I want to work on my poses. I want to, I want to be creative. I don't want to get
Hmm.
too bogged down in the technical stuff. But we work in a digital age, so of course there is a
Exactly.
technical side to the job that is kind of inescapable now, right?
Yeah. And actually, like
It's
that,
like driving a car, right? You kind of have to know a little bit about how to change the battery or how to put gas in the car or how to clean it or maintain it a little bit. It's that
yeah.
kind of thing, right?
Exactly. And I mean, even in this digital age, even if you know a software, sometimes like each year they'll update it or they'll change things. So you always kind of have to stay up to date with whatever it is that you're using, no matter if you're comfortable with the program or not. Like it is what you said. Like you never stop learning, and maybe before it was never stop learning about like studying objects to animating them, but now to animate them. But now it's like you never stop learning software. You never stop learning like technical stuff, and now on
Yeah.
top of that, all the artistic side of things as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. And the other thing I don't like is being out of work because that's happened to me a few times too.
Yeah. Do you
I,
find that it's a career where you're jumping from project to
oh,
project
for sure.
often?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's okay when you're young. Like when I was in my 20s, it didn't really bother me that much. But when you get older and you got a mortgage and a family to support, not knowing when your next job is going to be or where it's coming from or, how long it's going to be or how much it's going to pay, like all these factors, right?
Right.
Do I have to move somewhere for this job?
Hmm.
Especially in those pre-pandemic days, right? Before everybody could start working remotely, which I think we're still kind of doing. But yeah, not easy. Not
Yeah.
easy. When I was at Sheridan, I think it was my first year. I was a bit older, right? When I got
Mhm.
into Sheridan than most of my classmates. Like I said, I was about 22 going on 23 when I got into Sheridan. And I was deadly serious in my first year, like deadly serious. I was like, okay, I'm not here to screw around. I'm here to
Yeah.
learn animation. Everything they tell me to do, I'm doing it. I'm doing all my assignments. I'm handing them in on time, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to socialize or party or none of that stuff. So I was very serious in my first year. I kind of loosened up in my second year, partly because I got to know more people, started making friends, and yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. What can I say, right? But
Yeah.
um, a lot of my classmates were literally out of high school, and
Hmm.
so I could feel because I had my own apartment, I had my own job before I went to Sheridan, so I was a little bit more mature
Yeah.
in that sense, I guess, right? And I kind of felt like this is my last kick of the can. I got to get this right. I can't screw this
Yeah.
around anymore. You know what I mean? Like I got to make this work somehow.
I'm in that same position right now. Like
Yeah,
the
it's
exact same
I've,
position.
I believe me, I know the feeling because I was there too, and it's a little scary. It's also exciting though because you are kind of embarking on a new chapter in your life, right?
Yeah. Whenever
Um,
I think it's tough, I always remember that I'm pursuing like my actual dream job,
yeah,
regardless of what the outcome is.
right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're looking to work in a studio production environment or if you're looking to be more independent artist or something, Um, I would say get some experience in the studio system, the production system, and then later on you can always branch out and find your own thing, whatever that might
Yeah.
be, right? Whatever you want to do. For me, like I said, like when I got there to Sheridan my first year, I remember I had a teacher, he was telling us that he said, you guys, how did he say it? I think he said something like, half of you here are not going to make it, half of you are going to make it, or something like that. I was like, oh, here we go.
Oh
And then he
no.
said, he said, you guys are going to be delivering pizzas when you're in those downtimes between gig projects. Because animation back then in the 70s and 80s, and yeah, before, yeah, it hasn't really changed. Technology surprisingly hasn't really changed the business side of animation all that much, I think. It's all gig. We had a gig economy before there was a gig
Yeah,
economy, if you know what I mean.
for sure.
We literally go from job to job, contract, right? Bouncing
Hmm.
around for projects. And that's how you build, your network. You get to know people, people get to know you. It's like, you hear from a friend, oh, they're hiring over there on the other
Right.
side of town. Like, oh, we
Yeah.
go over there, and next thing you know, you're working with people over there and so on, right? That's kind of
Which
the
is
way we did it. You wouldn't find these jobs in the newspaper, it just didn't
right.
exist like that, right? Anyways, so that's what he said. Yeah, some of you will be delivering pizzas because that's what he had to do during his career, right? A few
Yes.
times. And thankfully, I never did have to do that. Thankfully, see, you were asking me, you said earlier that it was maybe a little easier or it was different back then. And you are kind of right in the sense that the industry was on an upswing in the early 90s, and that lasted right through the 90s, I would say. A lot of us, like myself and many of my classmates, we ended up going out to California. Even
Right.
some of our teachers eventually went out there. They're like, oh my God, there's something happening out there. We got to
It's a
go out there
lot.
too.
Yeah,
And
exactly. It
people
was
are making
booming.
money. Yeah. I heard stories of people being picked up. I don't know if it's true, but I heard stories of people being picked up at the airport in limousines.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
I mean, maybe it was like one person. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I don't know I mean, that didn't happen to me, but I do remember going out there in 94. So what happened is I basically was hired to go work for Lucas Arts, and I applied. I got accepted. They talked to me. They flew me out for 3 days for the interview. Rented me a car. It was quite fancy. It's quite
I mi
nice.
I miss the 90s. They sound great.
Yeah, they actually they were. They definitely were.
Yeah.
They definitely were pretty. There was a lot of exciting things happening in the industry for sure.
Hmm.
A lot of changes were happening. Um, Yeah, no, it definitely was.
Yeah.
But again, when I first got out of Sheridan, it wasn't quite there yet. Like it was still very much the way it had always been.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I remember lugging my portfolio around from studio to studio physically with my big
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah,
just
an
knocking
actual
on
portfolio.
doors and just walking in and trying to get an interview. And
Yeah.
they look at you like, who are what? Where are you? I said, oh, I just graduated from Sheridan. I'm gonna show you my portfolio. And they're like, can you come
Yeah.
back next week? It's like, okay, sure, yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my first job was, oh my God, it was a little rundown studio in downtown Toronto. He had like claymation things in the window that were all falling apart, and
Oh.
it was kind of a dusty old dirty little studio.
Hmm.
But that was my very first job, and I was sitting there in between other people's work, and there weren't any animators there. They were all working at home,
Okay.
and they would come in with their finished scenes, and I would have to in between them, right?
Yeah.
And I remember that some of them coming in, and they looked like The Walking Dead, like they had bags under their eyes. They didn't look very healthy. I would get their drawings. There'd be coffee stains and cigarette ashes on them, because they come
Yeah.
in folders, right? And I'd
Mhm.
open up the folders and there's all the drawings. And it was just like, what have I got myself into? What is this industry? What is this
Yeah.
animation industry, right?
Well, we all gotta start somewhere, but I mean, now
Yeah.
it's 2024, and the landscape of animation is just completely different. I think it's constantly changing, but now there's this combination between 2D and 3D, and now there's this AI, all these
Yep.
AI tools that are being introduced. So how do you embrace that change and use it to your advantage while still trying to stay true to like what you want to make?
Yeah. Well, honestly, when it comes to animation, as I was saying before, the animation principles that we try to teach, that we all try to teach and use in our work, that doesn't change, right? Whatever, the stuff that these guys figured out back in the 30s and 40s, everybody's continuing to build off of that to this day. That won't ever change. Like those animation principles will always be a tool set that every animator needs to have. regardless of technology, right?
Yeah.
So, the tools will change, the some of the workflows within that can change, but the basic premise of planning, time management, and knowing and understanding your animation principles will always be the foundation, right? For
Right.
everything you do in animation. Now, AI it's a moving target right now. I don't know where it's going. I don't really know if anybody knows where it's going. Right now, I don't really know of any studio that's officially using any AI technology in their production workflow. There might be some places that are starting to get into it. To me, most of it still seems experimental
Hmm.
and research development stages still. I'm not, I don't want to say I'm not like worried about it, but I'm kind of not that worried about it because I mean, I use AI, like I use Gemini. If I
Hmm.
want to, if I use it to kind of like to sound ideas off. If I'm putting a lesson plan together or assignments together, I might use it to help me shape, like I'll prompt it like, hey, I want to do this and this and this. How can I? And it might help formulate it for me a little bit in a way,
Hmm.
but it's still me kind of putting it together, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of art creation, I I've played around with a couple of them, but most of what I've seen and most of what I've looked at so far doesn't really excite me. Like it,
Yeah.
as a creative person, if I want to do a little animation, what do I want to prompt a computer or do I want to just do it myself? Like I would rather do my own storyboards, my own animation, my own backgrounds. Why would I want a machine to do that for me?
Right.
I don't
Exactly.
think in that sense I'm worried about it. It's obviously more on the business side where that can become an issue, right? So
Yeah.
if some investor or studio feels like, hey, we can hire 5 people to do this instead of 200 people, yeah, that could become a problem for sure,
Yeah.
right? um
Well, I
so
think that's where the worry lies for a lot of people, right? Just kind of that cutting costs and hiring less people and
yeah,
just using those tools.
yeah,
But I do feel like maybe that leaves an opportunity for independent studios to do more experimental stuff that, eventually, like with anything, especially what happened with 3D, like we got tired of it looking all the same. So
right,
you want to
right,
like step out of that, right? So
right.
perhaps, yeah, maybe that's where it'll go for a lot of animators.
I was looking at some freaky AI stuff on YouTube the other day. I don't know, somebody, I don't know who they are. I don't know, it's a studio or just like random images of aliens and weird looking costumes and people. It's very uncanny. It's very creepy.
Yeah,
I don't know
it's
where it's going.
yeah, it's still not
Some of it's
quite
kind of
there.
cool. Like some of the costumes and things were really quite like it's like, well, I've never seen anything like this before. It's really weird, right? Really
Yeah.
alien looking. There's a creepiness factor to it, right? That uncanny valley kind of thing. I don't know where it's going, I think right now the more realistic things like video games, I think are taking more advantage of it because I know there's this one software called Cascador, I think it's called, where they have an AI button in there. Apparently, I haven't had a chance to really play around with it as much as I'd like, but I think the idea is you can set a key pose here and another one over here, and it will physically, like using real world physics, figure out the
Hmm.
jump, right?
I
Or
see. Yeah.
which is I think for video games, I could see how that could be very useful. I mean, they already use motion capture,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I can see the advantages there. But for cartoony animation or just animation in general, we exaggerate life. We don't just copy it, right?
Hmm.
So doing real world physics of a jump might be the beginning, would be for an animator, really the beginning, not the end.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
That's like, okay, that's how it works physically in the real world. Great. And then you go in and you identify those keys and breakdowns and you exaggerate and you add something to it, right? You
Exactly.
stylize it.
Yeah.
So is AI going to be able to do that? I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. one thing, like there are some kids shows that are very limited right now. Like there's almost no animation in it. It's
Yeah.
just characters standing there blinking and talking, maybe. So stuff like that wouldn't be that exciting to do as an animator anyways. So if AI wants to do those things, have at it. You can have that stuff. We'll do the more
Yeah,
fun stuff, right?
exactly. The more creative stuff.
Yeah, maybe, So maybe
Yeah.
maybe that's where it goes. I don't know, but yeah. All I know for me as a creative person, do what I want to sit there prompting AI to do stuff for me. I might to help me give me some ideas, maybe like generate some, see what it can come up with and see what I can pull from that.
Hmm.
But it's kind of like using live action reference, I think, in a way. Like live action reference, sorry, is kind of like, yeah, I can see how that person's walking in the room and sitting down on the chair. So I see where the foot makes contact with the ground. I see where the weight's being shifted and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
At some point, so you break it all down and you kind of extract what you need from that, right? Your keys and whatnot. And then at some point you put that away, right? And then now you've got kind of what you need and you go to work, as an animator, you flesh that out and you set aside the reference. It's no longer needed anymore, right?
Yeah.
Um, maybe AI can be that kind of a tool for us, right? But I'll end on this about technology because I don't want to go on too much about it. But a few years back, 2018 or something, Disney was working with, remember VR? Where did
Hmm.
that go? Where'd all that technology talk to? Remember how everybody got excited about VR?
Yeah.
We're all going to be wearing headsets. I don't see anybody wearing headsets. I don't see anybody at the college talking about VR technology. I don't see anybody in the industry talking about it anymore, but it was like a hot ticket item about 5 years ago. Maybe that's going to be the same with AI. Maybe that's just going to go away too. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
don't even think the people working in AI know exactly like
no,
where it's going.
I mean the VR thing was kind of like I know Disney was using it. They had a tool an in-house tool they were building called Pose VR, I think it was called, where the idea was animators would put on these headsets and they'd have these controls, the gloves or whatever, these little paddles, and they literally go inside. It's like you're going inside your software and
Hmm.
you're just manipulating the rig inside, right? And
Yeah.
posing it and animating it. But that was like 5, 6 years ago, and I have no idea where if they're still working with that. Is that something have they used it on an actual productions? I haven't heard
Yeah.
anything really. So who knows where that all went, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows? Um, I think there's always going to be a need for create. I mean, you still need animators and artists to know like, you can't just have anybody show up and prompt AI to do animation because if you don't know the principles of animation, you don't know what visually as an artist what to look for. How are you going to know if
Exactly.
it's good or bad, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I think
I think
that
most
makes me
people,
hopeful.
well, I think most people that are using it right now creatively, not everybody, but I think most people that are using it are people who don't really know how to do art or animation or anything. So, but they're excited about these possibilities like, oh, I can just prompt it. It'll give me a whole bunch of images and I can just grab them and put them in and make a children's book. And then
Yeah,
I'll use this other AI tool to help me write it. And it's like, yeah, but is it any good? Is
exactly.
anybody going to really want to look at it or read it?
Hmm.
Eh, not yet.
Maybe a couple,
Maybe
but
someday. Yeah,
I can't imagine a lot of it being super creative because it's pulling from other stuff
exactly.
that, it'll eventually like become pretty samey, I feel.
I think it already is a lot of it,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
know like for me now I can tell sometimes where like if a video has been scripted with like ChatGPT, I can tell because
Mm.
they use the same words over and over again and again. They never
Yeah.
tweak it too. So like you could use it to start off an idea, but if you don't tweak
Yes.
it.
I actually tried that in my well, so I'm going to be teaching in the fall a pre-production course, right?
Hmm.
And I know the college is definitely like a little both nervous and excited about AI technology. And so I think they're trying to encourage a lot of us to sort of either find a way to use it or whatever, right? I did try to use it a little bit last year, and I found that most of the students didn't use it. Like they were, I let them use it to help formulate, come up with their ideas, right?
Hmm.
And most of them didn't. And the ones who did, I think the ideas were kind of,
Yeah,
like you would really have to work on that, you know, as you
exactly.
would anyways, you
Hmm.
know.
It's
So
just kind of like a starting point, like you
yeah,
said.
and I think that's okay as long as
Hmm.
that's understood, right? It's like again, it's
Yeah,
like live action reference. It's a starting point, and at some point you put it away, and
yeah,
you know you got to put something of yourself into it, right? At some point,
exactly.
right?
So
So
what are some books that you would recommend for people who are just starting and who want to become animators?
books.
Yeah, like a couple books.
Well, of
Like
course, I mean, the one that we recommended in the program, of course, I'll mention that one. It's right behind me there. I can see it. Right down there.
yeah, right there.
Right, the Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams, fantastic animator. It's years and years of his experience working with all the great animators before him even. Um, that's a great book. A lot of great visual reference in there and examples. Another one would be Eric Goldberg, another great animator today. He's around, still working at Disney, I believe. One of the last remaining traditional animators at Disney. He has a book, I think it's called the Crash Course, Animation Crash Course, I think it's called. Yeah, that's a great book too. It's got a lot of great stuff on there. The Illusion of Life, the book that was put together by Frank Thomas Ollie Johnson. That book's been around since the early 80s. That is a book for students, maybe I mean, even I still go back and read it, and I'm still learning off of that book even now, all these years later, right? Because a lot of the stuff they talk about there's a lot of sort of the basic talks of the principles of animation, and then they build on the sophisticated use of those principles as well, right?
Hmm.
So some of it can be a little daunting, but it is a good book to have in your library for sure. Um, what else? Oh, I have to shout out to one of my teachers from Sheridan. His name is Wayne Gilbert. He did two books. One's called, well, I guess it's Planning for Animation was the first one.
Hmm.
And then I think he came out with a sort of a, a longer version planning for 2D and 3D animation or something like that. Those are great too, because it's all about planning, which
Yeah.
is very important, right? Which you don't want to skip over that process, but he goes through that quite thoroughly, posing and all that stuff, right? That's a really good resource to have as well. Yeah, those would be
Are we getting books from you at any point? Like what are some plans you have for the future with your work and your career?
um no books for me, but yeah, for me, my main focus right now is what is it? It's really teaching right now. Like so I mean, I'm still kind of new to the teaching thing, right? I've been doing it for about 4 years now.
Hmm.
Um, so that's really my focus going forward. I don't think that's going to change, but I still will pick up freelance work every now and again. I don't have any plans to do it anytime soon. Um, I want to kind of enjoy a bit of my
Right.
downtime. But I still have a lot of work to do. I mean, I still have to, I still want to get prepared for the fall, even though it's still a few months away. Uh,
Hmm.
I still have to, because I'm always changing things. I can't help myself. I got to reinvent the wheel every semester.
Yeah.
I keep promising myself that one day I'll have the perfect lesson plan. I can just plug and play and just show up. It hasn't happened yet. Somebody told me you have to teach a class at least 3 times until you finally feel like you're getting it where it should probably be, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'm kind of in that area now, more or less. But yeah, I'm already like I just finished teaching animation theory the
Hmm.
same time when I was teaching in your class. Uh, and I already want to change. I'm already changing that one because I'm going to be teaching that also in the fall,
Yeah.
and I'm already changing it from the way I taught it.
Did you ever expect that you'd like teaching? Was that something you
No,
thought you
I
could
didn't.
do?
I wish I did a lot of mentoring because I've worked on many productions as a supervisor or lead animator, right?
Hmm.
And not all the time, but on many of those productions, I had to mentor junior artists, people who came right out of college or is like their first job or second job.
Hmm.
So I did have to do quite a bit of helping them either with the software or getting them up to speed on the production, giving them some simple stuff to start with, walking them through it, giving them feedback. So it was kind of like teaching, but not officially teaching, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of, I did a lot of that, but I never thought about actually teaching um, until what? I don't even remember how it really happened. Well, what happened really, I guess, as far as Conestoga went, was that our coordinator, Dave, he's also a friend of mine, right? And we were working together, and then he started working at the college. And at that point, I was working in Toronto, and it was too much for me. It's
The
getting,
commute.
oh,
Yeah.
getting too old for that. It was just like, I'd had enough of it. It was
Yeah.
just too much. I was tired by the time I showed up at my desk.
Hmm.
And then I had an 8 hour day ahead of me, and then another hour and a half getting home. So yeah, I mean, I had a 40-hour work week that was a 60-hour work week because of commuting, right?
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, it was too much. So, anyways, when this opportunity came up, I jumped on it. So I got in teaching part-time for a while. I tried getting in full-time 3 years ago. I didn't get in full-time. Tried again the following year. Try again, kids. Okay. Never give up. No, don't give up on your dreams. Um, Yeah, I tried again, and then I did get it in 2022 full time, right? So, which is nice now because now I'm not too far. I can, my life is a lot calmer. I like the lane that I'm in. I
Hmm.
don't have to, at my age, I don't want to be sitting next to a bunch of 20-year-olds who are working. We're all working together on the same production. It starts to feel weird. You know what I mean? So I've kind of had enough of the production side of things. Now I like it because I can kind of pick and choose a little bit more. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
can be a little bit more choosy. So yeah, like, if something comes up or if I want to make a bit of extra money or something, I can pick up maybe a little bit of extra work, right?
Right.
As long as my school stuff obviously has to come first. I mean,
Yeah.
it's always the priority, of course, but yeah, so it's kind of a good place for me to be at right now.
It does sound like a good place, especially if you're looking to settle a little bit more instead of jumping around
Oh yeah.
everywhere.
Oh yeah. No, I don't want to my days of moving around, hopping over places are too much because honestly, like when we left the United States in 2008, we came back to Canada, that was rough. Like
Well,
moving, whereas 14 years earlier, going to California was a blast because
yeah.
just me and then my wife joined me three months later. It was just us, right?
Yeah.
No big deal. But coming back with two daughters, two kids, all our stuff,
Yeah. Oh my
and
God.
then coming back to Canada and just like literally having to start over, right?
Hmm.
While I'm supervising on a production. Uh, on top of that was like, yeah, that was rough. That was
Yeah,
rough.
it sounds really,
Yeah,
really rough. I mean, I came here with my husband and we knew we were coming, so we didn't have many belongings. We came with like two luggages and backpacks and our
right,
pets, and it still felt exhausting.
right.
And I can't even imagine with like a full-time
Yeah,
job and two daughters and your whole life basically bringing it over.
yeah. It was rough, man. I mean, moving is just a lot of work, period.
Yeah,
Even if you're just moving down the street, I mean, just packing everything up and then lugging your stuff and
exactly.
it's exhausting. And God knows I've moved around so much. I mean, I lived, I don't know how many different places in Montreal, and then I moved down to Toronto. And when I first got to Sheridan, I was renting rooms out of people's houses, like I was a student, right? So
Yeah.
I'm literally renting a room in somebody's house. That was weird, especially after having had my own apartment.
Yeah.
It was like, that felt like a real step down. It was weird. But,
Yeah,
you do what you got to do, right? And then
exactly.
eventually just worked my way through and started working my way up. And it all took time, but, you know, But yeah, I mean, that was really the way. Maybe now it's a little different because since the pandemic, a lot of people are able to work remotely,
Hmm.
which hopefully makes things a little easier. I mean, the last three productions I've worked on, I've worked remotely, like literally right here.
Fully remotely, yeah.
Yeah, so it has been great, you know. I mean, it's nice, you know, because you just have everything you need here. Nobody's
Exactly.
bothering you, you know. But I think it's nice for people starting in the industry to be with other people, though. I think that is still important. You know, it's nice to be able to just turn around and say, "Hey, can you come over here and look at this?" You know,
Yeah.
or get up and ask somebody a question or whatever, right? So we are missing that component. And I think that's more important for people who are first getting into the industry. I think for us older guys, older people, let's say in the industry, it's probably not as much of an issue because, you know, we've kind of been there, done that. And now it's kind of nice to just be home and, you know, we kind of
Yeah.
know what we have to do more or less anyways. So, you know, but yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that's changing. I know the government's mandated government workers to be back in the office 3 days a week recently. That came up in the news. I don't know if that's the same with the animation studios. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, I'll let
Uh,
you know when I
yeah, let me
start.
know. Yeah, well, are you doing it remotely or
I'm doing it remotely,
good?
yeah. This
Yeah.
production is it's a studio from Austin. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you don't
completely
want to be
remotely.
moving down there for the summer.
No,
Yeah. Although
definitely
that could
not.
be cool, but yes. Yeah. Then you're dealing
Well,
with visas and all that kind of stuff too.
exactly. And I just
Yeah.
got here and I'm still dealing with my own migration here in Canada. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to stay remote at least for a couple more years.
Yep. Definitely. Definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question.
Absolutely.
Is my favorite question, and it's if you could have any magical art power to help you in your artistic process specifically, what would
Hmm.
you like that to be?
Maybe this is where AI comes in. Maybe that's the magical tool.
Maybe.
Um, yeah, you know, that's a good question. I think honestly, well, for me anyways, I would say, and I don't think it's really an art power as much as it's just a mental thing, like just having confidence in yourself, you know. Be confident with yourself, be confident in what you want to go after and don't give up on it, you know. Like I struggled a lot early in my career because I was always broke, especially not so much in my first year, but my second year. I had to take on two jobs to just make ends meet, you know. So trying to do that and trying to focus on learning animation and doing all the assignments and everything was like not wasn't easy, right? Like I believe me, I understand that situation, you know. Not everybody's in that situation,
Yeah.
but like I was saying about that when those two guys from Pixar came down earlier, right? Like just having confidence, like to just go. Like I remember even at the end of my second year, I had a classmate. He said, "Oh, I'm going over to Nelvana. I'm going to go show them my portfolio. Come on." I was like, "No, I'm not ready."
Yeah.
What? You're in Sheridan. What do you mean you're not ready? Go.
Yeah,
The worst they can say is no.
exactly.
You know what I mean? So just go for it. Like the magical power is have confidence in you. Like you're here for a reason, right?
Hmm.
If you're serious about it and you know you're here for that reason and you're putting the effort in it, then you have every right to go for it. You have every right to pursue it and go talk to people, go talk to studios, go to the festivals. You know, Taffy's coming up, right? Pretty soon.
Yeah.
Go to those
Next
things.
Saturday,
Yeah. Are
I
you
think.
going?
I'm thinking of going, yeah, in the morning.
Yeah. Well, we kind of are kicking ourselves because we should really be there with a booth and we're not. But I think,
Yeah, maybe next year.
yeah, I definitely,
Yeah.
definitely for sure. But yeah, so it's not an art magical power, right? It's not like that. I would say honestly, for people who want to get into animation or in any kind of like art that requires drawing or observe, like do draw from real life, you know, as much as you can. Do a lot of observational drawings, gesture drawings, and stuff like that, and study from life as much as you can. You know, that's your power, honestly, because that will always translate into anything you do in art. whether it's
I love
animation,
that.
painting,
That's
you know?
such a lovely note to end the episode on. I completely agree. I actually, it's funny you say that about life drawing because I just finished recording a video, and it's a little bit clickbaity, but basically the
Mm.
title is "The One Thing You Need to Know to Be an Artist or Animator," and
Oh
it's
yeah.
literally just life drawing and like studying from life.
It absolutely is. Yeah, it's everything because, again, if you're studying from real life, like you're learning how you're observing people, right? You're actually paying attention to how somebody's walking. Everybody walks differently, right?
Hmm.
Like when you see somebody in the distance coming at you and you know that person, how do you know? Like what is it? What is you can't see the details, but you know that's your friend.
Yeah.
Why? Right? It's just a certain way that people move, right? So just learning to observe people, how people sit. Why is that person sitting the way they are? Why are they slumped over the table? Why is that person over there leaning back? What does their body language say? What does their expression say, right? That all
Hmm.
translates into your key poses and animation, you know? And that's also what makes your artwork original because you're not relying on traditional like usual formulas. Like, oh, this
Yeah.
is the way we do happy people. This is the way we do sad people, right? Yeah, in animation, we do get caught up in a lot of that very cartoony, and I love it. I will be the first to admit it, and I'll be pushing it all the time because it's
Yeah.
all about exaggerating too, right? We want to learn from life, but we want to push it and exaggerate it, style, caricature it, or whatever, right?
Hmm.
But that foundation has to start with understanding how people behave and how people move, their postures. So, as much as you can observe and draw from real life, the better you're going to be for it as an artist, right? And you can pull that into your own work, right? When you need it. So if you get a scene one day where you have to do two people talking to each other sitting at a table, you might remember when you were drawing in a cafe. Oh, I remember that, this one person, she was gesturing a lot and she was very animated, very excited, and the other person was maybe leaning back. How did that person react to the other person, right?
Yeah.
Were they looking at their phone? Were they just looking around? So these are things you kind of like you file it away in your brain, right?
Hmm.
And then at some point you'll pull that reference back out again when you need it. And yeah, I believe that's what makes your work original. It makes it coming from you as opposed to relying on some stock thing or where you're copying
Exactly.
something else, right? So yeah,
Beautiful.
that's your
Thank you
magical
so
power.
much.
There you go.
I love it. Thank you
Right?
so much for everything. I feel like there was a lot of wisdom to take from this episode, and I hope that whoever's listening enjoyed that and paid attention to the key recommendations: confidence, live drawing, never give up.
Never give up. That's right. Galaxy Quest. Never give up. Never give in, or whatever they said. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. For sure.